Hello and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a weekly book club podcast where we talk about some Dungeons and Dragons and discuss how we might include it in our role-playing campaigns. With me back again for, I can't remember how many times you've been on now, Rob.
Ooh, half a dozen?
Half a dozen times. Yeah. But back again is my wonderful friend and co-host, Rob. Rob,
Hello.
How are you, my friend?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, I think it's about half a dozen. The last one was Path of the Planebreaker.
Yes, of course.
And that was a two-parter.
Yes.
But then there were loads that I forgot we did. The Modrons.
Al-Qadim.
Treasure Island, or whatever it's called. Lost Island. Tolus. Well, the Starter Adventure, yeah. Dark Sun.
Dark Sun was one I remembered. Yeah.
Blackmoor was one.
Blackmoor, yeah.
Back in the day.
Because I think we spoke about possibly doing Red Steel, and then we both looked at it and went,
oh my God, so boring.
Yeah, we both went like, maybe another time.
We could do a quick review on that. If you want to read the most boring second edition source book / genre book of the whole TSR thing, read Red Steel. So boring.
I like it's just like the most boring titles are like Red Steel. And you're like, okay.
Also, the Wii game that came out in 2006 really confused Google. But no, very boring. The only good thing about it is the CD that you got in the box set. It's full of sounds that you can play at the table. Which is great, because normally I just do that with my stomach.
You're like, and you go into the fog, rumble.
Oh, yeah. And the orcs, particularly noisy. I'm not. Let's move on. Let's move on from here.
I like the fact there's always orcs in your games now, just because of your stomach.
Yeah, that's all I can do. Orcs and kobolds.
Well, Rob, what are we talking about today? What is the topic of choice?
So we're talking about, again, as is tradition when I'm on it, not D&D. We're talking about another roleplay game, this one called Trophy Gold, which is part of a sort of subset of games just called, I think Trophy is the main name, and there's Trophy Dark, Trophy Gold, Trophy Loom, which is a specific setting. Don't know if there's any other. I think it's just Dark and Gold at the moment.
There's Dark and Gold are the main ones, and then there's lots of like variants. There's one I saw, which is Trophy Golf, which looked very fun and very silly.
It's like Powered by the Apocalypse or Powered by Blades in the Dark, which is also Powered by the Apocalypse. But yeah, Trophy is the system, I think. It's very interesting because it's very not like an RPG. And they're quite candid about this. It sort of starts, one of the first things it sort of says is, this isn't your mama's D&D. But in a way, it's kind of a more, I would say, a more structured roleplay game. Mm-hmm. It is way less free-formy in its storytelling, but I'm going to caveat that, in that you go into very specific, what's called incursions, which are effectively an adventure, but it's very this... and then this, and then this. In a way, it's closer to an investigation game like Call of Cthulhu or a Gumshoe game, where it's you need to solve this bit to get to the next bit. I'm not saying it's you will do this, this, and this. It's just, it's not, here is a dungeon, kick in the door, off you go. It's a fantasy game that's more like, there's rumours of a dungeon round here. Go to the town to find it. Maybe you hear a story, maybe you hear more. It's very much more a structured tale than an RPG, I would say, that you play through. To me, it almost felt like you'd play through a short story rather than your own free-form thing, which I'm sort of saying it like it puts limits on. It doesn't.
Not at all.
But there is definitely a different feel to it than a free-form, chaotic, here's a situation, off you go, have fun kind of thing. Is way more like, you will do these things and they will produce quite a cool story, but how you do them is up to you, and that's the important thing.
So it's interesting you say it's like almost like Cthulhu-esque in terms of investigation. So it is adapted from Cthulhu Dark, but it's also based on Blades in the Dark as well, which are kind of investigative games anyway, but have that sort of dark undertone as well. What stands out to me, like why it feels different, is because it feels very much like a video game in a sense of like there is an end goal, in a sense that you need to get gold. If you get 50 gold, that's it. You're done. You've made it out. But things cost money. So it almost becomes like, one of those time-wasting games like Diner Dash or Candy Crush, where you like mechanize or automatize workers, etc., and you get this money, you can buy another building, etc. That's what it kind of feels like. You go off on these adventures to seek treasure, and then you go back, you pay your bills, you pay your expenses for going on this mission. And if you succeed at it, you go, great, you could buy more stuff to go on more missions, or you could bank it.
Yeah.
I like that. It feels very much like a choice, because here's the main thing I love about this game. You have no stats. You don't put any pluses to anything. So it calls itself like a push your luck RPG. That you're one roll away from just dying. And I'm like, Fuck.
Yeah.
That's such a risk because you think, oh, well, I just need another mission. What could possibly go wrong? I'm so close to my goal. And then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a JRPG from the Nintendo DS game days called A Trine Odyssey, which I think is back and remastered on Switch. Same sort of situation where you have your party and your stuff, and then you go out into a dungeon, then you come back and you pay bills and maybe hire another one person with a stick. Then you all go out again, and then just one time, boom, you're dead. You turn a corner and you're dead. And I think that, in a way, it's almost, and this sounds ridiculous to my ears, but it's the video game equivalent of an old fighting fantasy game book.
Yeah.
Where you stock up, you do your things, you got your ideas, oh, you're dead. Try again. But maybe you'll do a different story rather than a fighting fantasy where you do the same story and over again. This time it's, that didn't work, let's go somewhere else. And it's that feeling of, you've got to be aware. It's the opposite of 5e.
Yeah.
You're going to die. Someone with a stick is going to kill you. And it's not as pathetic as something like a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I would say. It is still a particularly Trophy Gold. Trophy Dark is a bit more grimdark, very old world Warhammer kind of thing. Trophy Gold is kind of Lord of the Ringsy. It's just you might be Boromir and get hit by an arrow. You might not be Aragorn, you might be Boromir kind of thing.
Yeah,
so it's that kind of, with a bit more money involved. But no, it's a really fun read. It's a good read. It's a good book to get through. So do you want to run us through how you play or how you create a character? That's the start.
Yeah, well, the character, I mean, I'm always a big fan of having a character creation on one bloody page. And a lot of it, one thing we've been talking about, I keep mentioning every time since you've talked to me about it, random tables and rolling random stuff, randomly generating stuff and making that character. So right at the beginning and during the sort of character creation, you can roll 2d6 and then match them up to and pick those entries out, essentially. And it's quite, the words for it are quite vague. And so it's up to you as a player to interpret it. So, for example, well, I'll ask, do you have any dice on you? And we could do some rolling.
Yes.
I know, you're like me as well. So I'm always within 6 feet away from a pack of dice.
Bag of dice.
There you go. I knew you had some somewhere. All right, I need 2d6. It doesn't matter about the colours.
Yeah, this will be dark, this will be light.
Fantastic.
So we're making my character. Let's go for the first bit. So
we'll grab your name.
6 and 6.
6. Oh, wow. 6 and 6.
I know, right? Best roll you can possibly do.
Vero is your name.
Vero, I like it.
Here's the thing. So you could use that whole row, or you can roll another 2 times.
Roll on every roll. You got to come on. I'm an old school D&D. So Vero used to be. This is his current occupation, right?
This is your role in the team doing the treasure hunting. Yes.
13. 1 and 3.
1 and 3 is astrologer.
Okay, so next to astrologer, there's 3 little words. What are they, Fiona?
I will tell you. So these are your skills, my friend. Are darkness, stars, and symbols. I know. How exciting are those? Let's roll again for me, please. Okay. We'll get your background. So this is what you used to be.
Oh, a 6 and a 3. An uninspired artisan.
All right, well, you get a crafting skill as well.
Brilliant.
So what is great is that, again, there's no pluses to these or anything like that. It just so happens that if you're able, on one of the 5 roles you can do in this game, if you're like, oh, well, actually, my skill in stars comes in useful here, you can add an extra d6 to your roll, essentially. And usually it's only ever 1d6. It's quite cruel, this game, in the sense of, like, you don't have big dice pools of stuff that you'll succeed.
Unless you're going against each other.
Oh, we'll get to that,
which
absolutely.
We'll get to, yes.
Let's go for your drive. So why are you motivated to go get treasure? So roll for me again those 2d6.
Wow. Try and roll on the table. 2 and 5.
Oh, to buy your brother's freedom from Barsool Prison.
Fiona, what's Barsool Prison, please?
I don't know. And this is the thing. A lot of this game, it does say, like, hey, you can check out more about this in Trophy Loom, but actually it's up to you as a player to come up with that stuff. There's stuff like Beast Bitten and various places mentioned, but this is just like, here's the thing. Go with it. And I really like that. It just tells you straight up in that simple paragraph. It goes, you decide. No, I don't know.
And I think that's fantastic. I think that is the quickest way to get players involved in a world. And the GM get involved in a world, because immediately, right, Barsool Prison, that's going to be the end game, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, that's an incursion in itself.
There's a brother, there's a prison. Yeah, so these things I can pull on as a GM. Absolutely. Yeah. Finally, let's look at rituals. So these are like your magic spells. So every character in Trophy can do magic in some respect. So do for me again. We'll do one at a time. So another 2d6, please.
I have the ritual of 52.
So 52 is Dryad, which is quite cool.
Yeah.
We can go into the full effects in a second, but roll for me the other 2 for me, please.
Oh, right. I'm starting with this amount of ruin. Oh, my God.
Well, you might as well.
54. Emote.
Emote. Oh, great. Love that.
And 33. Channel.
Channel. Nice. So what was that first one? Dryad was your first one. Yes?
Dryad.
Dryad. Stay still to transform into a tree and communicate with other trees.
Okay.
Could be useful.
Could be very useful. Then it was emote.
Emote. Heighten or dampen the current emotions of all in your presence.
That's quite a good idea.
Could be good to stop a fight. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last one was channel.
Channel is allow a spirit to act through you. I'm going to be honest, that sounds dangerous.
Sounds dangerous, but also could be very useful. You never know.
So this is the thing. These are like prompts and stuff like that. So it's up to you and the GM to discuss what kind of magic you can do. And this could be something that's out of combat. It could be something in combat. I really love that. But of course, as you sort of rightly pointed out, having rituals and having lots of equipment add to your burdens and add to your ruin as well. And basically, the more ruin you have, the more likely you're going to lose yourself to the forest, the darkness, the world, the corruption, etc., which is great. As soon as you get 6 ruin, that's it. You are out as well. So pretty brutal. But that's it. That's all we need to do to make characters. It's 5 steps. So easy, so quick.
It's fantastic. And I've got an astrologer who can turn himself into a tree.
Classic.
That's really fantastic, and I mean that in the truest sense. That's great. That's really cool. Like that's a great character. That's not a character class I had to fudge or anything. That's just a cool little, like, that's it, done. Yeah,
I like it. It's very similar. I think as I shared with you recently, Orbital Blues, and they have very similar things of like tables of just really good tables of stuff to be prompted. Again, and really why we're kind of looking at Trophy Gold in general is that not only is like the incursion stuff, which is what the meat of this episode is going to be about, but I actually just quite like easy, straightforward systems are like, don't worry about anything, don't prep, just go for it. Because again, it feels like very much like you're going to die, don't worry about it.
You're ready. Someone didn't have to sit for half an hour working this out and stuff. I mean, really, it does hark back to sort of old school D&D where your character was you roll 6 numbers down the line kind of thing, and that was it. Off you go. Will you survive? Will you won't? This has got a bit more structure to it. But I just love that you have in it, as we said, with the whole prison thing. That's just one example, but there's just so much that immediately are like, well, how do astrologers?
Why do you need them to go on a hunt? Why are they important?
Why can they turn themselves into trees? You know, immediately, is this just me? You know, or is astrology the domain of the wood folk or the trees in this? You know, is astrology? Do people read the signs through the trees? You know, and you've got all this stuff now that you immediately can just start playing with through 5 dice rolls.
Yeah, it's nice to create a world from your character rather than the other way around.
100%. I'm a big believer in that. That's a really big one.
Yeah, player first rather than world first. The other thing to note, and I think this is a bit of a Blades in the Dark thing as well, is the backpack. You get 3 predetermined items, and then you have 3 empty slots. But you do have something in them, so you just put your hand in halfway through the adventure, going, I must have something here, and then you roll, and you're like, oh shit, it was a spoon I brought after all, or whatever.
Huge fan of that. It taps into that. I think we're both very big Doctor Who fans, and it very much plays into that kind of I've got the gadget right here kind of thing, which is great. It's fun. I like the backpack thing, and I would definitely use the troika thing of how your backpack is stacked is how hard it is to get stuff out, because that is good fun when there's someone trying to dig to the bottom of the backpack when someone's trying to eat you.
Like, quick, where is it? Where's
that spoon? I needed that spoon.
I'll essentially just go over what the main mechanic is. We won't dwell on it too long, because obviously I know this is supposed to be a D&D podcast, but
yeah, absolutely.
There are 5 roles that you would use for it. The biggest one is going to be the hunt roll, and every other role sort of comes out of this one. So the hunt roll is basically you're exploring the world. You're basically, it's your perception, you're exploring, what do I see, what do I do, etc. Can I do this? That isn't related to fighting. It isn't related to hurting other people per se. And we talked about it before, it's mostly D6s. You need to have a way of distinguishing them between light and dark, whether that's different colors, different sizes, whatever, as long as they're D6s. Basically, you always take a light die just for rolling, just for like exploring the world, etc. And you take, and usually another light die just to, if you have a skill or a piece of equipment or just something that will help you that from your background. But you only ever get one. You don't stack because you're an astrologer who can turn into trees or anything like that. You got 4 levels of success. If you roll a 6, you gain something called a hunt token. Basically, it's another way to be like, oh, I've collected a couple of these. I can change them in for gold. I can change them to say I've set a goal, etc. 4 to 5, you gain a hunt token, but you also encounter something terrible. 2 to 3, you encounter something terrible. 1, you lose all your hunt tokens. and encounters something terrible.
Terrible, yeah. And the lower you roll, the worse it is.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And unless you get a 6 on most of your rolls, something terrible is going to happen. And I like that. Is that there's no hope of like, oh, well, I got a 15. What does that mean? It's like, something terrible happens.
Something terrible happens, yeah. Did you try a thing? Something terrible happens. And you have to try things. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So the hunt tokens are there to get gold, as you say, which is the absolute goal of this game, but also to move the adventure along. The more hunt tokens you get, as you said, you trade them in for goals. So you can't just stand not doing anything, but doing something comes with a risk, which is fantastic. Yeah, as they say, it's a push your luck game.
Yeah,
and it's done very well.
One thing I will mention, I won't go into all the rules in big detail, but there's something called the Devil's Bargain, which I absolutely, these are like, we've talked about it before, like incursions, which I think is a cipher system mechanic.
Yes.
That idea of like, well, you can get another light dice for your risk roll only if you take on a consequence that will happen regardless. And I love those sort of things. Like you succeed, but at a cost, and actually making it matter. So they give examples of like, collateral damage, getting lost or separated from your companions, which is probably not great.
No.
Betraying a fellow treasure hunter, attracting unwanted attention, stuff like that, which are always very simple stuff. But I think you could really get into be like, I don't know, you have to give up a secret of your character or something like that and really go into that backstory a little bit. Because again, these characters are, as it says, they are painfully thin. Most likely because they're not going to survive. And I know we probably won't cover it, but there is something called Half Fire.
Yes, it is. Half Fire, yes.
An additional campaign thing about like was just expanding out when you get back to town and how you clear conditions and stuff. I really like that. I quite like that organization. It feels very, again, Blades in the Dark. Like we go back to our lair. What do we do in our downtime?
Yes,
and stuff like that?
Bit of downtime, bit of working out kind of thing. And then that's the way you reveal more and more about you and the party and what that prison is. Who is your brother? What is that prison? That's where it all comes from. You don't need to know that on the first adventure.
No.
You can know that later. And actually that speaks very much to how I run games. I don't like someone who comes to me with a book of backstory as a GM because I'm just like, that's cool. I'm not going to read that. I'm sorry. No, I'm sure it's great. I'm sure you spent a lot of time, but I'm not going to. I've already read this book that you haven't read. So I've done my reading. If it's important, it will come out in the game. If it's not important, we'll never touch on it. So don't need it.
Set your expectations, I guess.
I don't know if that's popular, but
like I recently for Orbital Blues, the wonderful Ed Spence, who was my GM, he's really, really good. But he gave me a huge document of like answer these questionnaires, and I basically filled it in with the barest detail, and I was like, I'll find out when I get there. And it was helpful for him because then he built a fantastic story. And I don't want to take that away, but I was like, when I saw it, I was like, 12 questions? I don't have time.
Yeah, I always skip that bit in game. There's always Cubicle 7 often have answer 12 questions about your character, and I always skip for that. If it's important, it'll come up.
I will say the mechanics are they're a bit dense at first. One thing I do love about this book is that every couple of pages they have like, this is what the risk roll does, and then has a flow chart about how you work it through. I would have those as references to put out in front of players so they can see and work it out, because it's a really lovely thing, but they don't have it as an additional thing to print out.
It's very simple as a system, but there's a lot of, if you do this, you can add this die, and if you add this die, you can take this die away and look at the top die that you're rolled in this die, which I think as soon as you start playing it, falls into place easy. Reading it is a bit like, so I do what? So it's a risk roll, so I add a die, but it's not a risk roll, so I don't put my body on the line. So it's 4 or 5 pages. Like it's easier to read it and then maybe even play a little adventure yourself, just give yourself an idea.
One thing I've discovered about doing certain streams now about reading through these books, because I tend not to read when it goes, here's an actual written example. I go, I don't want to, GM says, okay, you open the door. I hate scripts like that. I am not a big fan of it, but this could have benefited of like Susie is facing the crow thing. Like the combat stuff is really interesting. Like the idea that everyone rolls their light die and that is their weak point. And so when they all roll their dark die, and obviously if they have lots of dark dice, if any of them match your weak point, you take a ruin. Oh, I love that. That's your armor. That's and it's I really love that.
The combat reminded me of Tunnels and Trolls, actually, where actually you sort of all pile in together. You don't do, I do this, then I do this, and I do that. You put together your plan. You say, I'm the archer, so I'm going to launch arrows from far. I'm the fighter, so I'll run up and hack. I'm the astrologer, I'll turn into a tree. And then you roll a collective pool and see what happens. And do you know what? That's great, because while combat is integral to RPG, it doesn't have to be the be-all and end-all. And actually, just saying what you're doing and then rolling a collective dice, great.
Oh, I love it.
It works or it doesn't work. Yeah, it's fantastic.
I looked at Agon, which is like the ancient
Yes.
grift one, and that has a similar thing about like you all roll and then you go in order of lowest to highest, and so whoever finishes the combat on the high, they get the killing blow, and it's all narrative, and it's all in one. And I was like, that's great. We're like just getting it done in one and having that narrative thing, and then you're not wasting time going, oh god, we still haven't got it, because that's the thing. Because basically the way we get it down is that if you two of the dark die match the monster's endurance, match equal to or above, then the creature is defeated, and if not, we go again. And the endurance is between 2 to 12 or something like that.
Yeah, because at 12 it says run away.
Yeah, don't do it.
If it's above 12, run away. Yeah,
exactly. And then you just have like the help roll, which is just like, oh, I help in some way, and can then lead into conditions as well, which are again more descriptive. But then it could be like, oh, you are, say, petrified by the Medusa's gaze. Well, that's going to be a risk roll to make sure you can do your action, and if not, you're going to get worse. Yeah, the final sort of stuff is that sort of opposed roll against, that's it, a contest roll. Sorry, when it's typically treasure hunters will act against each other. You take a dark die if the contest itself is inherently dangerous or deadly, and then it goes, take as many dark dice as you're willing to risk.
Yeah.
And I love that. What a test. The gambler in me is like, ooh.
You get to throw as many as you want, but any ones, and you get a bit of ruin. And you've only got 6 hit points. This is the thing to remember. You only have 6 ruin. You start with what? So you've got 5 hit points. Every ritual you take is another one. So my starting character with 3 rituals, I've already got 4 ruin. I've got 2 hit points left. Like, I'm going to go down quite quickly, but I really want that treasure. And Fiona's character is also going for that treasure. And unfortunately, it's going to involve one of us maybe getting a dagger in the back. Maybe we just need to leap a little canyon, but there's danger involved. And that's great. That's really fun, because actually I might choose to risk 4 dice and roll all 6s, and then, well, hey, I've won.
Yeah.
But also, I might not. And it encourages that, which I think is just really good.
Fuck around and find out. That's how I think this is the RPG, the fuck around and find out RPG.
And interestingly on this, the more ruin you have, the more dice you get in your initial roll. So actually, the more desperate and dangerous you are, the better you are at contesting with other treasure hunters.
So narratively juicy, isn't it?
Yeah, straight right there.
They have rules for stuff like hirelings, which is also interesting, because if they die, you take on their burdens.
Yes, you owe money.
And that feels such a HR thing. It's like, well, Derek died. I guess we'd better tell his widow and 15 children.
We're doing a collection, plus 1 burden, everyone.
But then my favorite thing, which I told you off recording, is the bestiary.
Oh, yeah.
And encouraging the players to make a note of all the creatures they come across. But you, the GM, it directly says to you, do not tell them the creature's name. There is names in the bestiary, so they've got to come up with it. So I'm like, that is great. Because this bestiary probably will outlast the players. And I'm like, oh, this is a story about how this tome is written rather than the individuals. I'm like, grr.
I've always loved that, because the moment you say you encounter 2 orcs, all right, well, they've got hit points 8 to 15.
Yeah.
And they fight like this. And, even the best way, even if you then map a different monster over it, but to just not tell them and be like, well, what do you call them? What are they called? Because it's what are the chances that every fantasy world calls those green things orcs? No, some people are going to call them pigmen. Some people are going to call them whatever, and then that's cool. And that's great. Or pig women.
Pig folk.
Pig folk, yeah. And that's, that again, that's just building your world straight away.
Yeah, and so that is the game in a complete nutshell. There's some nice, I will say, what I do like is that it's very nicely written, the GM sort of advice about like setting expectations. Yeah. There's a nice bit obviously about like, here are your principles, as you said, like be a fan of the players, treat them as storytellers, etc. But ask pointed questions and build on the answers. Never let a good idea go to waste, which I quite like. The example for that was like, if a player shares a story about an emerald stag that hunts those who trespass in the woods later, when everyone's forgot about it, bring the stag back and gorge that particular treasure hunter. And I was like, oh, yes, I will.
Yes, I will do that. I've written that down now.
But the one thing I think we were mostly excited to talk about is this idea of incursion. So as you sort of rightly said at the top, an incursion is basically this game's example of a scenario, of a setting that you could just do a couple of missions in. And this book's got about 11 of them. There's a big incursion at the end, which is basically just the Undermountain-esque type dungeon. What I like about it, they're all different by different writers, because this was a Kickstarted RPG. Is the structure of them. And this is something like, I think you were saying that you do something similar, but for me, because I've been reading a lot of D&D modules and they're all written a bit fluffy. Sometimes it's very hard as me as a GM to go, like, where is it? Where is that bit that has the information about the treasure, about the traps, etc. And it takes me ages. And even though it's like 10 seconds in game time, and obviously the players aren't bloody noticing, but I'm just going, everything has stopped still because I can't find what the DC is on something.
Yeah.
And these incursions, just the way it's structured, solves all that issues.
So I also caveat, we've both only read the first one because this is the game I actually hope to play. So once I don't want to read ahead.
Absolutely.
And the first one is called Hester's Mill. Spoilers for Hester's Mill. It's the Dunwich Horror.
Yes.
Spoilers, it's Dunwich Horror, but in D&D. Yeah. And it even starts with a bit of history that you can tell your players. Mm-hmm. And then there's the actual history. But it's not page upon page upon page upon page. We had that in Blackmoor, and oh my God, that just went on forever. Mm-hmm. 1 paragraph for them, 3 paragraphs for you. Gives you a theme word, and all of them have this. In this case, the theme is harvest. So if you ever are just like, oh God, they've walked into a field, I need to describe this field. Okay, well, the theme is harvest, so it's overgrowing with corn, and there's gourds and pumpkins rolling in the fields. Some have obviously been left behind and they're rotting and the smell gets into your nose. That's it, straight away, done. You've done a thing there. Or there's pitchforks abandoned next to a load of hay. You can immediately do that. I think that's really important because also tied into that, each of these incursions has what are called little sets, which are the mini scenes. I didn't like the word set. That actually threw me a little bit.
I thought set was the overall thing.
Oh, maybe it is. See, I got a bit confused about this.
Basically, for each of these incursions, they have like a flow chart of what you said, scenes. I see them as scenes, and each scene has then like the props in it. But I think the overall thing, it's called sets. I don't like that. I agree with you. I think scenes sounds better to me as well. Yes.
And each of them has their own, what they've called moments. And this is something that I've always done because I'm a hipster. But this will give you just something to throw in at some point. So in this case, on the first one, the characters are approaching this old farm hamlet, and it just says, here are 3 moments. The sun is hanging high in the sky, golden and hot. Brilliant. Wild patch of fat, brown pumpkins, gold, orange, green, and purple. And a gust of wind causes a pile of dead leaves to cyclone around the treasure hunters. These moments, do that for every game you play. That's straight up. So what I do when I'm running Cyberpunk, I will roll usually on tables, but I will think of 5 or 6 of these. Just a blimp goes down in the distance, or an advertising slogan I can shout at someone, or someone running out of the shop because they just held it up, kind of thing. Just have these things that don't matter, but they matter because the moment you add these in, you're there. And this line writes them out. If you run an adventure, just do that from now on. I'm telling you that now. Just do it. It's great. It's a quick fix for the GM to quickly make the world bigger without having to do much, but with writing a line.
Yeah, with the moments above it, it obviously says goal and where they're going. It says, oh, well, they need to get to the place. And so these are moments related to how they get there. It always says that, by the way, this is the goal of this scene. Yep. And I think just making it absolutely straightforward, because the players won't know.
No.
A lot of times I find in D&D, certainly with more open-ended games, I'm running Curse of Strahd and we're all really enjoying it. But I just say to them, hey, this is a sandbox game. I'm giving you lots of stuff to play with and there's no problem with that, but you need to make the choice about where to go. Yeah. And it's the same thing here. I think it's nice that I know the goal is to get to X and I can then express that quickly. Whereas I think sometimes in D&D modules, sometimes you're like, what were we doing? Because obviously they get tied up in their own little role plays and stuff like that, which is fantastic. But you're like, shit, what were we doing? Yeah. But at least here you can be like, okay, so the 3 markers that you have are this, this, and this. And then here are the moments tied to this when you choose to follow them.
Yeah.
This is the goal of the scene for Fiona to tell the players or, railroad them to get to Torben's End,
It's 3 hunt tokens, cash them in, you get to the goal, effectively. You have to explain how, but that's how you do it. There's 3 moments. You could do an almost reward system of every time they get a hunt token, do one of these moments, as in you're on the right line. Keep going kind of thing. It does actually say you can, if you want, just say what the goal is to them. If you've got that type of player, you can just say, okay, and in this first scene or area or set, you're looking to find the road to Hester's Mill.
Yeah, perfect.
There's some terminology in this game I don't like. They call them props. I don't like that.
I don't know what I would call them else. I thought scene dressing or something, or scene elements.
I don't know. I need to have a think because I don't like, and this is purely me, little rant here, other media terminology in roleplay games. There was one years ago that was like telling you how to be a director of a scene and, tell the players that the camera pans down. It's like, no, I'm not watching a film. If I was watching a film, I was watching a film. I'm not in a play.
I'm playing
an RPG. So I don't know what I'd call these. But it gives you props. So in this case, there's some ruins, there's a statue, and from these, the players can investigate them, have a look around, and they get a bit of the background, work out what's going on. It's very close to a gumshoe game. It's an investigation game, where you always get the clues. It's up to you to stick the clues together, but it's not a case of, oh, you need to find this out. Why don't you you go to the ancient library and look through the text. You roll me library use. I got a 97. Roll it me again. I got a 67. Okay, great. Okay, you're just like, well, what was the point in the roll?
Keep smacking your head against the thing until you actually succeed. Yeah,
and I think this does that really nicely, and also throws in what you mentioned before. Your favorite thing: you encounter something terrible. This tells you what those things are. Either monsters, traps, etc. But it's all there. It's great. It's one page. I'm looking at Torrens Bend, which is the first set of this incursion, and it gives you what props, traps, treasures that they can go and have a look at, additional traps, additional treasures. Maybe there's a monster, maybe there's not, and how it acts, kind of thing. It's all here, and this is a great structure. This is fantastic.
It's a table essentially. So you have the columns of props, traps, and treasures, and like you said, that first one. So that first prop in the row. So you got the statue of Lord Galdron, I'm going to say. Yes. And then next to it, traps. There's no traps in it. But then next to that is treasures. And it's like, what treasure is related to that particular prop? And then you go down one, which is the ruins of River Rock Keep. And then next to that, in the traps column, it's like, there are ghouls in the ruins. And then it goes, and then there's a signet ring in the treasures one. That's where you can find in the rubble. I could just read that so quickly. And maybe it's just because maybe I do a lot of data admin entry, and maybe I'm just used to doing that. But I was like, oh, that's described to me 2 different areas for them to investigate that I can easily improv and take up a simple paragraph that doesn't require how big is the town, how am I 30 feet away from the statue, all that sort of thing.
This wall is 10 foot by 4 foot, and then this wall has collapsed. It doesn't matter, it's a ruin. Everyone, the moment you say a ruin, everyone's got a picture in their head anyway. It's great.
There are stat blocks in quotation marks for the creatures that you can come across. So like you said, this is all on one page, this set, which is fantastic. So the ghoul stats, you can just roll a d6, and that's what it kind of does as a flavoursome thing. So, if you rolled a 4, it cracks a bone between its teeth. Or 5, makes clicking vocalizations to other ghouls. Yes, this is what I love.
Yeah.
Alien does this very well. Alien RPG. Yeah. Well, see what the Alien does. Roll a d6 for me. You roll a 6.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's head bite.
Yeah.
And they go, no. I was like, you rolled it. I didn't.
It's also like Troika, though. They have a meme table where, okay, you encounter a ghoul, but I've rolled a 1, and actually this ghoul is slavering over a piece of rotten flesh. Okay, this gives the players a chance now. They could back away, they could jump it. Whereas if I rolled a 6, they encounter a ghoul, and not only have they encountered it, it's reared back ready to lunge, so you're going to go straight into combat. That's the same thing. You've run into that ghoul, but in one case it's on its own, it's doing a golem and sort of loping around, and on the other it's doing a Smeagol. No, other way around. And it's going to get you. Sorry, hashtag justice for Sauron. But it gives, and that's it really. It's got that. It has a weakness which the players can learn, and you can actually, if you play a full game of it, you can go back into town and be like, guys, what's with these things in the hills? And like an adventurer for a burden will be like, oh yeah, these guys, holy symbols, they're the best thing you can do. So next time you encounter it, you know that, and you knock a couple of points off its endurance, which is its one combat stat, which I'd love, because you could go here to this little town, be like, oh my God, it's full of these weird little golem guys, run back to the village and be like, guys, what's going on? And immediately having a weakness just gives them a bit more verisimilitude.
It reminds me a lot of like, I finished recently Resident Evil 4 for the first time. I actually got to the end of it, and it feels like that when you never played it.
I've never played a single Resident Evil game.
But obviously, as you go through, and obviously, like you're playing like Leon, and like I got to save the president's daughter, and you're like, yeah, Leon, okay. But obviously, every time you come across a new thing, he's like, oh, come on. And I like the fact that like maybe you go back and you go talk to the merchant, and you're like, so what are the things that explode and they just like whiz around like this? You go, oh, use a flash grenade. I'm like, thank you.
Yeah, off I go.
I will now make several of them, and I like that idea. That's the conversation you have, almost Resident Evil style. You're like, this is dreadful. You're like, yes, if you pay us gold, we'll give you exactly what you need now.
What are you buying? But there is that feel to it that you are preparing an expedition. This isn't just oh, lads, let's go to the hills and off we go. It's no, you stock up on your equipment and that costs you burden. You hire your people, that's more burden. You ask for information about the area, that's a burden. But the more you invest, the more treasure you're going to find, and you can
Hopefully.
back with it. Hopefully, yeah. If you wanted, you could just leave the town with you and your two mates with a sword between you. You're not going to get back. But if you find 1 gold, that's yours. That's free. That's safe.
Yeah.
So it does give you that idea of starting an expedition. I can imagine you could play, say you do 1 incursion, the next one is going to be like the beginning of The Hobbit, where they're all planning what to do kind of thing. And you can very much lean into that.
Yeah.
Because you actually don't know what's going to happen. You don't have all that, and then we do this, and then we do this. But let's stock up on supplies and stuff without it getting too, I've got 7 silver. How many platinums in a silver? I don't
know.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just,
So the other thing to mention is that you can encourage the players, again, like similar with the bestiary where they're like, you name the creatures. Similar, you encourage them to name a map. So obviously, like here, we're talking about Hester's Mill and Torben's Bend. So you can say, here's a piece of paper, circle it, and do Torben's Bend. And then you can go on to Hester's Mill, etc. Yeah. But then obviously, if you're running away from something, you have to roll, like I think it is a risk roll to see if you get back to a place you know. Otherwise, you go off the map and then you end up in a new place that's not connected to the map.
It's fantastic. It's really good. Yeah, because there is no set map. There's just point to point to point of these are the 6 sets, and they will go from this set to this set to this set, maybe to this set, maybe to this set. But it's not, and this is 4 days journey, and they have to go this way. It's just it's really. I'm very tempted just to lift some of these wholesale and put them into games. I do like the system, but I also would like to lift some of these and put them into different games. This first set would be a brilliant Call of Cthulhu adventure.
100%. It is.
Like,
it's got all the horrible stuff. You've got cultists. You've got people giving in to a demon. You've got a horrible birth imagery of crow things for both male and female people.
Yeah.
The birth dreaming condition where you dream, and it's just
brilliant, which is so Lovecraft.
Oh, so good.
You could lift this and put it into Cthulhu Dark or Call of Cthulhu, the scary scarecrow.
An invisible demon that's on top of the house, which will come and attack you. And there's a great little paragraph that goes, but what if the players don't ever find this creature because obviously it's invisible and it can't move? And you're like, you will make it. You will make them find it in some way. And I'm like,
and it will come back as well. Yeah, it's really decent. I would highly encourage you. It's only a couple of quid, I think, on drive through. If you want to take not all the prep out of an adventure, but if you want to realize how little prep you actually need, go and download this, read a couple of them, and go, okay, take a famous adventure, take the Mines of Phandelver, and make it into an incursion and see how much fat there is that you don't need, that stresses you out. Because I don't want to read this paragraph about how big this room is. It doesn't matter.
I think this works so well when a lot of people aren't doing. I know, like, we've got the D&D VTT coming out, and obviously maps are always been a big thing. Here, you don't need maps at all. But I like how it just takes that stuff away from it. And then obviously if you're going into that combat stuff, it is simplified down so much. I just, everything about it, I'm just like, this makes it so much easier.
Also, I love the weakness of crow things, distracted by rotten or partially masticated meat. So if you just chew some meat and spit it out, the crow will go for that rather than you.
It's so gross, isn't it?
Horrible. It's really horrible.
So gross. I love it.
This is the bright version. Trophy Dark is the grim version.
Yeah, you warned me off that, and I was like, okay.
God knows what that's like. I'm going to have to download and read that.
I haven't read any of Trophy Dark yet. From what I understand, it is like a forest that tries to kill you, and I'm like, Symbaroum was also similar to that, but that's more fantasy and like people getting misplaced, refugee cities, and then we'll go into the forest. That's where the safest place will be, and the forest is like, fuck you. This is my fucking tree. And then there's corruption, and also like it's that Symbaroum sounds really, really cool, but it is definitely like very corrupted JR talking, whereas this could be any kind of fantasy, I feel like.
So it kind of puts me in the mood of the Joe Abercrombie books, the stuff like the first Law trilogy, so the Blade itself and stuff, where it's fantasy and it's nasty, but it's not, and then you die for no reason. It's you die because you fucked around, but it is nasty without being ridiculous. Whereas I think Trophy Dark, I've not read it fully yet. I think that's more like, ha ha ha, you're dead now.
Yeah, nice try.
But this is just an absolute treasure, a trove of stuff to lift. Really, it really is. Like, to keep on the theme of a book club, GM should pick up this. 100%.
I think so.
There's so much to lift from it that you can easily put into D&D.
ultimately coming to this at the end and sort of reflecting on it, yeah, I think the rules, you need to have a read of them just to understand what the incursion is. But as you said, like, just take the elements of incursion, use the way it structures it to restructure your modules and stuff like that, just for easy referencing. I sometimes sit in a session going, I have no idea where they are or what they're doing. And then just having these as simple, like, index cards to be like, this is the scene. Right, I remember. And then having outcomes of what happens if they don't, have just like one or two, it's like good outcome, middling outcome, very bad outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they burnt down the whole coffin shop again. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you know what? Now you've said it, we both work in administration.
Mm-hmm.
I think these are written out for administrators.
They really are.
Because this is how you'd plan a meeting. It's what's the goal of the meeting?
Yep.
It's an agenda. It's effectively, here is a scene and here is the agenda. This is what we want to end up doing. Here are a couple of things to raise. Here's how we're going to get to it. And meetings can be bad. Meetings can be very bad. So a GM who can run a meeting, who can run this is perfect. This is literally well written out agendas with lovely artwork.
I'm definitely going to call all my Teams meetings now incursions.
Incursions I'm going to as well, yeah.
I've got a 10 a.m. incursion tomorrow.
10? That's too early.
I know, right?
You can't have a meeting before 10 or before. You can't have it between 12 and 2 because that's lunchtime.
That's lunchtime.
And by 3 o'clock, who's having a meeting at 3 o'clock?
And you should never have meetings on Friday afternoon.
Yeah, just don't have meetings every.
Oh, sorry, no, you shouldn't have any incursions on Friday afternoon.
No incursions.
We'll come to the end of this. Oh, thank you so much, Rob, for bringing this to my attention.
I raced through.
But this is the thing. I think I'm very excited by it because I was a bit like, oh gosh, it is a long book, but obviously a lot of that is the incursion stuff.
Yes.
But there is so much to take away from it. And I'm always a big fan of rules being like literally a couple of pages, although as we've discussed, a little bit dense in times. But I think it could have benefited from like a couple of like written examples of like, how do we fight this creature? How do you use rituals, which are still a little bit like you can use it to weaken it or do it directly and all fun stuff, There's
lots we didn't touch on. We didn't touch on the campaign system and stuff, which is very simple, but very fun. Matt puts me in the mind of a lot of miniature game campaign systems where you do a little bit of upkeep, a little bit of experience, a little bit of growth onto the next one, rather than let's carouse in the tavern and, oh God, Mike's doing his impression of a bar person again. Oh God.
Well, he's trying to find out information about these things we've put down as crow things. He's just said, have you seen this? What do they do?
What do they do? We didn't touch on omens.
No, really cool thing.
Natures of the land. So what you could do as a GM, you can just say the whole world is under the sway of the trickster or the parent. You can choose a god to take it over. Or if you wanted, if you're Zodiac minded, you could be like, well, it is in the halls of Saturn. I don't know the Zodiac.
Where are you going with this?
Yeah, but you can say that. So actually at the moment, the world is convulsing. It's a world of change. The seasons are getting faster. The skies are bulging with, promise and stuff. And you can really change it up. Or we're in the season of entropy, or the god of entropy is in charge and nothing's changing. It's awful. It's like Britain into 2024. But these little bits that you can plug in, plug out, put them in, put them out. They're not essential, but there's just loads of nice little bits like that.
It's a very good point. I did write this down because it's the idea of giving the landscape around you a personality, a trait. And it's something that I try and teach when I do improv is like a lot of times you're like, can we get a location for where to set? People go like something stupid like the office. Yeah. And it gets to the point where they just have a scene about being fired or being called into a meeting. Those are the two things you always get with office. But then if you go, oh, let's get a fantasy location, people go, Wizard's Tower. People go, oh, that's really cool. And they go and be wizards. But then it's like the tower is superfluous. And I'm always like, you have to respect where this place is because it has a personality. It isn't. It's opposite of what we were saying before about the players informing the world. Having another player, which is the world that reacts to you, is so important. And I love these like sample personalities. And again, this is a wild reference, and I've mentioned it before, but like Thomas Hardy does that in all of his books. He always starts his books with like, oh, the moors. Sometimes you look across from them and you can't tell the sky from the ground. It is that dark. And you're like, all right, Thomas.
Yeah, all right, Tom. Cheer up.
And then here are the players and the heath and and the same thing with what's it called there? Kathy and Heathcliff, that sort of
Wuthering Heights.
Wuthering Heights, absolutely. Yeah. I'm a massive fan of like giving personality to the setting. So I love these personalities. They're so good.
The only thing I would argue against that is if you ever listen to a review of something and they ever say, oh, well, the city is a character in itself, isn't it? That means it's shit. It's just a fact. Anyone who says, in a play, New York's actually a character in itself, is it? It means you were bored. That's what that means.
You couldn't think of anything nice to say.
You paid attention, yeah. So if anyone ever says that about anything, it's shit. come at me, Arthur Miller.
The other thing to say, what it reminds me of, because I know you're another person who likes thinking about other RPGs, it reminds me of having a place that has a personality is very reminiscent of Heart by Grant Howitt and Chris, I can't remember their last name, unfortunately, but basically they have Spire, which is like dread in the sky, and Heart is the thing underneath.
Ah, okay.
And that has been warped and corrupted, and you do little like dungeon delves, and you're like, the further you go in, the weirder it gets, and you're like, we are going to all get corrupted by the Heart, because it's like, we tried to put like a subway network down there, and you're like, no, you didn't. The Heart swallowed it.
Yeah, that's gone now.
Yeah, exactly. And I can highly recommend. I've been playing it for a pre-recorded stream, and it is very good. They've got stuff like Deep Aperis, which are just bee people with spells, which are
wow.
horrible.
They fit into this. This fit into Trophy. That is one thing I would say against this game. Actually, I think the name's awful. I think Trophy Gold is a terrible name. I don't like it.
It's because their whole thing is like treasure hunters desperately seeking stuff, and to go into these horrible places, you need to get out alive or they will make you their trophy. That was the line I read, and I was like, I get what you're doing, but I agree. It's not what comes to mind, but I can't think of a better one either.
It seems like a mistranslated Japanese anime name to me.
I've only just realised probably why it's called Gold is because it is centred around the theme of getting gold.
Oh, yeah.
I did not realise that until literally 2 seconds ago.
Trophy Dark is about your death. That's literally you will die. Trophy Dark has got the Cthulhu ending of you will die or you will become a thing of the forest itself. This one is there's a way out. That's why this is the positive
Capitalism.
one. Yeah, the manumission kind of thing. There is a way out in this one.
How interesting.
That's what you got to do. Just stop drinking coffee and having your lattes, and you'd get through Trophy Gold. Literally, page 68, every latte is one burden. That's what it says.
That's ridiculous. That's so
avocado toast is one ruin. Who knew?
Yeah, you're like, but I need that last avocado toast. Yeah. Oh, I need it.
Otherwise, I'd be able to afford a house.
Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention, Rob. Because I'm really glad I got to actually try it. And I can see so much benefits to putting it into D&D games, but also other RPGs as well, just in terms of structure. So thank you very much. As always, Rob, is there anything you'd like to signal boost? Because obviously I know you're not a person we can find on the internet anymore.
No, you can't. Ha.
So what would you like to recommend to our wonderful listeners?
Some stuff. I've listed them all here. So this is an old one, but I'm just going to say this to anyone now. If you're running a fantasy game or you're playing anything fantasy, you're a player in a game, and it can be D&D, it can be Trophy, it could be Numenera, anything that's fantastical, just read some Michael Moorcock, because honestly, just read it. Read the Corum books, read the Elric books, read the Castle Brass and the Hawkmoon and the Runestaff books. Just read it, because this guy, it's ridiculous this, because he's one of the greats. He's mentioned in Appendix N of D&D. He's just amazing. He's got these stories that are just so out there, so weird, and so fantastic in the truest sense. He's better than Tolkien, and I don't even mean that in like an arrogant way. The worlds of Moorcock are way better. And even the fiction that isn't fantastical, stuff like Behold the Man, about a time traveler who goes back in time and works out that he has to stand in for Jesus because Jesus is actually an absolute idiot.
What?
And it becomes this whole recursive thing where he realizes he has to be the one crucified because Jesus isn't good enough, kind of thing. It's fantastic. Absolutely good. But seriously, just read. I would recommend Hawkmoon or the Corum books or the Elric books. They're just brilliant. Some elements of their time, but also some elements that are so far ahead. There's a trans main character. There's a black main character. This is fantasy literature of the 1960s. We don't get that now without someone going on about it. So in some ways, obviously attitudes of time, and in some ways way ahead of us. So great man. Also listen to some of his interviews he's done recently. He's 80-something, still kicking. Yeah. His stuff about infiltrating anti-fascist groups in the 1970s is so funny. They infiltrated one group where, of the dozen of them, 11 of them were left-wing infiltrators of the group, and there was only one actual person, which is just fantastic. Yeah, it was this group in Tower Hamlets or whatever. It was fantastic. So the other thing tied to that, the role-play game by my good friend Alan Barr, who runs Gallant Night Games, and it's called Shadows of a Dying Sun. A bit of an experimental RPG. It is described as a resource management RPG, where actually a lot of it, the dice do come into it, but you can also control a lot of the sort of damage you do or damage you take, but you have to spend resources and stuff. Even your life path is a resource that eventually you spend and will die. It's all very Book of the New Sun, Jack Vance Dying Earth, weird fiction again. I'm a big weird fiction guy, so sort of that's exactly it. So more like Numenera-y, Troika-y kind of stuff. So that's that one. And the last one, a little known company, Nottingham based, but they're called Games Workshop.
Oh, yeah.
And they're currently released.
They sound like they're up and coming, aren't they?
Yeah, they're up and coming, lads, good lads. So it is because I'm listening to the last book of The Siege of Terror, which is the end of the Horus Heresy, which is a 40-novel epic, now 52-novel epic. And it's brilliant. It's fucking brilliant. It's really good. I'm sure whoever's into it is already listening to it anyway. And if not, it's great. But if you just want to hear about insane fascist child soldiers blowing the shit out of each other, you know, that's everyone's jam.
Yes, sure.
Great. Yeah, it's great. But yeah, the end of the death, volume 3, it's brilliant. I'm just walking around the flat just saying the end and the death a lot to myself. My girlfriend's left me.
I was going to say, yeah, well...
No, she's not.
no. I'm just like, just yourself wandering slowly down.
100%.
Down.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Yeah, just listening and reading and stuff. That's the best at the moment. How about you, Fiona? What can you recommend? Can you read even? Is this all a massive... Have you just guessed what it said on the pages? Yeah.
What can I recommend? I'm just trying to think of anything interesting I've read. I mean, obviously, I could always recommend The Traitors, because you and I both watched The Traitors.
Yeah, right.
I'm still getting my way slowly through the Australian version of The Traitors. Okay. I'm enjoying it. Yeah, I know everyone's like super hot on it, and there's probably loads of spoilers out for it, but it is so fascinating to see people crumble under pressure and doing incredibly odd things when they are truthful people. And one you recommended to me, which is on the list, is like The Devil's Plan.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
I love stuff like that, where it's just all about like you, because I've been playing a lot of Blood and the Clock Tower recently, which I absolutely love. I got a little bit better at it. My games are now 50% won or 50% completely get it wrong and fail, and that's fine. You know what? I'm actually really enjoying it, because basically, ultimately, what usually happens is when people play these games, people don't want to give their information. So I've got to that point now, going, so I'm this, and people go, oh. And it doesn't matter if I'm killed, because I can still talk in these games.
Yeah,
it's super fun, because I even then, when I've managed to get something right, I am shocked, because usually I'm like, because there's always the caveat with Blood on the Clock, because there's a little bit more advanced rules than like Mafia or Werewolf.
Yeah, well,
you have to go, okay, I think it's so and so is this and that and that and that. But I could be drunk or poisoned, or I'm this and that and that. So you're always saying, and when anyone gives a theory, you have to go, or you could be drunk. And it's great. I did watch Saltburn recently.
Everyone's watching it. I have not watched it. Everyone's watching it.
It's very different. Yeah. It's not to everyone's taste. It did make me feel very sick in places. But what I liked about it, it had that sort of thing where you could tell there's the villainous bits, and there's certain beats where you're like, oh, this is a really... Because you could tell, oh, there's a car crash coming of some sort.
Yeah. Right.
What is going to happen? And so there's some really good performances. But ultimately, it is a lot of privileged people getting their just desserts.
Yeah.
I think Barry Keoghan is pretty brilliant in his role. So I'd recommend it, but it is not for everyone.
I think the famous bit's sort of gone viral now, hasn't it? I think everyone's aware of that.
Well, so there's a bit at the end where he's dancing to Murder on the Dance Floor. All the music, by the way, is of our youth. And I'm like, I definitely listened to this like yesterday. But then there's a bit with a bathtub, and that's all I'll say.
Yes, that's the bit that's gone viral.
Those are my random recommendations. Yours was so much more coherent than mine.
No, good. It's good. Where else can we find you, Fiona?
Oh, look at you. So it's seamless.
I know, right?
Yeah. So What Am I Rolling is the other podcast I do, which is a tabletop RPG one-shot podcast. As always, it's going very well. We've got some interviews out. We've done some interviews with two different people who use RPGs as part of sort of therapy, differing opinions about using RPGs. But I think both of them are equally valid in the sense of like, it's nice that we can use RPGs, that there is some benefit to people who might not normally get to access that. So I'd recommend checking those out. And there'll be other RPGs we're running at some point. I've just really got to do a bit of planning, because things are happening in my life.
Things are happening.
So yeah, that's it though. That's all from me.
Good stuff.
So with all that out of the way, see you next time, listeners, and see you on the flip side.
See you all.